Welcome to Movie and a Beer, everybody. This is Dan bringing us in, and on this wonderful, wonderful episode, we watched a crazy film. There's 5 things in the film, but there's only 4 of us.
5, 4? Is this
5 or 4 or 3? What is it?
Cinco de Cuatro?
Cinco de Cuatro is coming up, yeah.
This is Aaron. I guess I'm your Cinco de Cuatro expert. I hadn't planned that, but it's too perfect.
I'm Blake. I'm your falling down expert.
Are you falling down? Always.
Mm-hmm. And this is Brian, your experimental film expert.
Are you experimenting?
I might be with 5 different beers.
Yes. So this film that we watched was based on a 1967 experimental film by Jorgen Leff. I guess he wrote and produced and directed and did all of the work except for the filming part, I guess. Like he didn't do the cinematography. Or did he? I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. But it's called The Perfect Human. And the movie we watched is called, and I'm going to let Aaron describe it because this was his suggestion, and while it is a good suggestion, I'm going to let him get into it.
Good Lord. This is this is hard.
Mm-hmm.
The movie we watched is from 2003.
Yes.
It's called The 5 Obstructions. And it's a film nerd film where one director challenges his mentor and hero, another director, to remake an earlier movie in 5 different ways with these ad hoc kind of, as he comes up with them, constraints.
Obstructions.
You might say obstructions. Mm-hmm. With these creative restraints with each remake of the film.
But we only see in the film itself, in what we watched, you don't see the whole, I think it's 12 or 15 minutes long. You only see parts of it.
It's like the original, I think, is this 20-minute black and white film from 1967.
Yeah.
And you see snippets of it, different parts of it throughout the whole movie. I think in the, if you have the, DVD or Blu-ray, then the extras, I think they got the full film. But I one of the questions I've got once we get there is which one would you want to see the most? But yeah, part of this is Lars von Trier reaching out to his hero and trying to get him engaged, trying to pull him out of this post-career kind of dwaddling depression that he's got.
He's trying to fire up the creative juices of this person he feels is a filmmaker's filmmaker.
Yeah.
And I would say this film holds a really fascinating place between documentary, filmmaking masterclass, and kind of experimental film, and also personal homage to his mentor.
Right.
Definitely.
And Lars von Trier is a filmmaker you've heard of before, not necessarily his mentor.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So knowing what we were going to watch ahead of time, we had asked to maybe watch this a while ago and trying to figure out, we brainstormed, a few of us, what do we do? So I had this.
So we went to Haiti.
We went to Haiti where the guy lives. No,
and then Cuba.
And then Cuba. And then Bombay. And then
we drank vodka before 12.
And
Brussels. And then Brussels.
Right.
Smoked a lot of cigarettes.
Lots of cigarettes and cigars.
Well, and there was vodka too.
Lots of vodka.
And
breakfast vodka.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And there was Coke product placement going on in there. But so we chose the theme of IPAs and 5 different IPAs. One to go with, we're just doing samples here. We're just doing a little taste, not full beers for each of us, because that would be not a smart way to do it.
There would be no podcast.
Yeah, we at Movie and a Beer do not suggest drinking 5 IPAs in a row unless you are going to be safe about it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's the definition of binge drinking.
Binging it.
Yeah.
Well, we did
You
little
can't
taste.
enjoy a good beer if you're binging, if you're slamming them.
Agreed.
Correct. In looking at the different styles, I thought, okay, so we should probably pick breweries that I know the beers from, so that there's no guesswork, there's no question. It's just, does this go with it? Because we have there's 12 official different subcategories to the IPA in the BJCP guidelines, which is a beer judge certification program ran by the American Brewers Association. The official categorization of beer that most people use. You don't have to, but most people do.
12?
So IPA, there's 12
That's
different
insane.
types of IPAs that can be judged. You can say this is 12A or whatever the number is. I think it's 24A is the main category, and then American IPA, and then variants from there.
Holy cow.
We did a West Coast IPA, a Midwest IPA, an East Coast hazy, a cold IPA, which is a newer style, and then a red IPA, which has been a style that's been around a little while. So we will talk more about those later and about what makes them different and what we thought about them, because they were all good beers. But did they go with what we watched?
Boy,
That's
I
the
didn't.
question.
This is one of the first times I didn't take that consideration. I was just tasting the beer to taste the beer while enjoying this film. I really like this movie.
Yeah.
Aaron's been telling me about it for at least a couple years, right?
I
We discussed it on a couple of hikes.
a couple different times, and I think for me, part of what I love about this movie, I think this is where it first occurred to me that limitations, like creative limitations, can actually spark more creativity. And if you're a songwriter, if you're a filmmaker, if you're like a dungeon master for D or D&D group,
Writers.
if you have a prompt, but that prompt limits you somehow, it could be something that you really hate, but when you sit with it and you wrestle with it, you actually can come up with something even better.
Yeah,
than-
you find a creative problem-solving solution.
Yeah.
to that.
It's what makes a lot of sitcoms go from good to great when they get a slash in their budget. One of my favorite jokes, and this is the one big blockbuster thing I'll talk about. In the first Deadpool, Fox slashed their budget by like something $30,000. The last big fight scene, he was supposed to have a big gun battle, and they wrote into the scene like, "Oh, he forgot his guns." So it's very much a very funny Deadpool thing, and now you just have this choreography versus this huge blowout that would have cost way more money.
And it takes him 15 minutes to die.
I mean, yeah,
Spoilers,
And then he's not
Dan.
really dead.
Spoilers.
Yeah, well, it's
Spoiler.
yeah, maybe.
But anyway, back to the 5 obstructions.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love a good restriction on a film to make the creator think differently.
Right. So the first movie, dear listener, it was this 1967 black and white movie. Jørgen Leth was the Danish filmmaker that did this back in the day, and it was an experimental movie, kind of just pondering of like, what would a perfect human be, and putting this person into all these different situations. Like you see them eating, you see them like getting dressed, you see them
Shaving,
shaving.
falling down. Like I made a
Dancing
joke earlier.
Yeah.
and
Walking around the
eating
room.
a fancy meal, as it were.
Yeah.
I do like a little bit of the gender jokes that like the perfect
Yeah.
man is thinking about women and how he wants women, and the
Yeah.
perfect woman is like, I'm strong in spirit, but I'm so affectionate with everybody. Like
Yeah.
right. But
Yes.
this film was then remade, and the first obstruction was set to you have to film it somewhere you've never been before, and you can't have more than 12 frames in a single shot.
How long is 12 frames, Brian?
That is a half a second.
Right.
That was tough to watch. I mean, beautiful, but my brain started to
Yeah,
hurt.
it's skipped around a lot. He used a lot of repeat, like back and forth
Yeah,
shots
yeah.
with a little bit of progression, like you would do in stop motion.
Well, but he used music really artfully to motivate the fast-paced editing.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he edited a lot on the beat, and he didn't use all of his 12 frames for every cut.
Correct.
Right.
And we're going to get to this later, but that was maybe my favorite of the 5 obstruction films.
It was very glitchy though to me. To me, it felt like, okay, I understand filmmaking, I understand editing a little bit to an extent. I've seen enough TV, enough different kinds of movies, enough animation, enough cartoons to have seen pretty much all the film styles that are out there. And this style, when it's used very sparingly, is effective. But the whole thing being done that way,
Like a 20-minute movie
was like
a lot.
That's too much.
Yeah, it was frenetic. It was frenetic, and I think it really communicated like a lot of like energy and vitality. I think that's how Leth kind of interpreted it and like leveraged it. But you think of Cuba, this like force of life.
Yeah.
And you see
Beautiful music, bright lights,
and the perfect man dancing.
Classic cars.
classic cars,
yeah.
smoking I assume delicious cigar. I don't smoke.
and interposed with the dancing and the cigar smoking and the shaving, like there's shots of the city. You see like Havana kind of
Yeah,
interspersed in all of this. And it sounds like really shattered and distracted and going in a million directions, and it is a little bit, right? But
But it makes it feel alive, like this Havana is alive.
right,
And I also appreciated that in spite of this obstruction, he was able to still tell a very similar story to the original film.
right.
Correct.
And then on to the second obstruction.
That one, oof.
Right.
That was intense. That was one of the rules was he had to go somewhere he didn't want to be.
The most miserable place he could
Yeah.
think of. Yeah.
Yes. And that was the one that Lars disagreed with the most. Like, you cheated me. You didn't follow the rules
Didn't follow
right.
the
You weren't
rules.
supposed to have any other people in it.
Well, part
and
of
that's all it
the
was.
rule he said was like distance, like you need to be close, but it has a distance. And Jorgen took that as, well, we'll have the crowd like blurred out by a, I don't know what those are called.
A screen.
Like a semi-opaque translucent screen. And I like that. I like that take on it. Like you do seem like you're so close, but then I think Brian mentioned the commentary on it.
In the original film, he has a moment where this guy is eating a very elegant dinner. Mm-hmm. And so for this obstruction, most of the movie was him eating this elegant dinner in the red light slums of Bombay, India.
Yeah.
So he had this distance between him and the poor residents, the underprivileged residents, with this like saran wrap frame behind it. And I actually think, as he envisioned it, was far more impactful than the way Lars wanted him.
Right.
Lars didn't want any background. He just wanted him in the uncomfortable place. Mm-hmm. But this version of the film became a
social commentary.
A social commentary on class.
I agree. I think Lars wanted to see Jorgen Leth in like a really uncomfortable position of like what do you feel, what do you experience emotionally, and how are you challenged by your ethics to have this extravagant lobster dinner in the middle of this destitute street in Bombay. And you can kind of see on his face, like
you can see that on his face.
Yeah, he does not look comfortable.
Right.
But I think it's much more impactful
because you see the background
for the audience. I mean, it actually elevated this portion of this short film within the feature film.
I think it was the most dynamic in the fact that it made him, because he had to play the perfect human. Lars had to actually partake.
He said
he was in front of the camera instead of behind it, and that's really hard for directors.
Yeah.
I'm much more comfortable just telling him what to do.
Yeah. He did at one point say, like, this was the original actor. I think was it Klaus Nielsen? This is like his role. He owns it. I'm just borrowing it. You know, like I'm just
right.
You know, but I also think too, like Brian and I agree that if it was kept to the original intent that Lars von Trier had, we would have no idea that this was filmed in Bombay.
Yeah,
amidst all this, you know,
it could have been
dispossession,
a fixer-upper in some other city.
Yeah,
without the people in it, the abject poverty.
I wonder.
It would have just been a fancy meal in front of a building.
Yeah, in front of like a white
set.
wall. It could have been a set, and like I think maybe,
and you'd wonder why the filmmaker is so pained in his face,
right?
But now now you're in on the secret
because he's allergic to fish,
and I think that was part of what Lars rejected, or Mr. von Trier said, you cheated, you made it easy,
but then
that shouldn't have been easy visually.
But that led into, I'm torn for this being my favorite or the fourth one. It led into one of my favorite of the obstructions, was if you're not going to do it my way, do whatever you want.
Yeah,
he said either go back to Bombay or do a segment
with no rules.
With no rules.
And
that's your rule.
And Jorgen was scared. He's like, "No, can I have anything to hold on to?" No,
some creative hook. Some creative hook.
No,
can I get some creative prompt.
You go nowhere to start. You have the full empty sandbox.
And I actually really liked that one because it was very modern. It was kind of like
I enjoyed it. Yeah. The two screens,
split screen activity.
There was a lot of split screen,
right?
And I like this one the least. Well, no, the final one I like the least, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, I agree. But this one, I don't remember if it was Brussels or Paris.
It was Brussels.
Brussels.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a remake of the original. It felt almost like its own thing.
Yes.
Kind of a sequel asking some of the same questions about what's a perfect person, what's a perfect life.
Correct. So animation. They all hate cartoons.
So that might have been my favorite.
The fourth one, they all hate. They call them cartoons in this derogatory way.
They've never seen one they liked.
And I remember the animation one and being blown away by it at the time, like back in the day, and like how inventive, like visually, just the way that it was arranged on the screen. Like 'cause sometimes it's like a comic book, and sometimes it's like and not a comic book at all. But they really play with, I think, the space on the screen and how that's...
and so calling it a cartoon doesn't really describe what this film is.
No, it's an animated short.
It's an animated short. The style they used is rotoscoping, which is where you shoot live action and then animate the frames. But they layered several frames from the 3 previous
iterations,
along with some
original
film.
The gentleman taking his coat off and putting it back on over and over.
And they did some frames as if it were a graphic novel or a comic book within there.
Yeah.
And I think all 4 of us, this might be our favorite
Right.
version.
I think because it was the most visually striking, and it did, while it tried to sort of tell the same story, and you knew because you'd seen the other ones. If we had not seen the other ones and you'd only seen that, you'd think, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it's really disjointed. There's not a lot of continuity between what's being represented. But having seen scenes from the original, it made a lot of sense.
Yes. I would agree with Dan.
I really appreciated like Jorgen Leth's reluctance that, you know, he hates cartoons. He doesn't want to do this. He's not interested. And then like you can see that once he starts working on it, once he meets the animator, once he's got
his creative fire is lit.
Yeah, he becomes
and it's
proud of it.
also kind of, screw you, Lars von Trier. I'm going to make the best version yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Because
he does.
neither of us want to do a cartoon.
Right. But to me, it's fascinating that somebody like, you know, they start out with this, you know, stubbornness maybe, or this, I'm going to say like this denigration of animated films.
Yeah.
And by doing it, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think he came around. I think he came to like,
I think both of them did. They
Right.
saw it and they're like, wow, I really like that.
This is creative. We
Right.
can do this.
Yeah, because there's films that have subsequently been made that were done live and then rotoscoped out. Like there's software that just converted it over, but you still have to, there's still editing and there's still everything you have to do.
A Scanner Darkly is like the most well known of like the more modern era, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Lord of the Rings, the Ralph Bakshi version in 78 was
that's true.
very rotoscoped.
Yeah.
What was there was a movie we watched for the podcast that was released, I think maybe a month or two before Star Wars, and I think it was like something Wizards.
Wizards was the name of it.
Also Ralph Bakshi. His film right before Lord of the Rings.
I was thinking about that movie a little bit, like the animation style that it had. I remember it being really creative, and you know.
So yeah, it might be a forerunner. I'm sure the animator they hired to help with this Obstruction.
Wait, was
I'd
that
seen Bakshi's work?
Was that in America? Did they say where he went to meet the animator?
Texas, I think.
Austin.
That's right,
Texas.
because I made the
animator in
right.
Austin, Texas. Yeah.
I love seeing Jorgen meet all these new people and get different experiences from his
go to other craftsmen, other filmmakers,
Yeah.
and pull them into his creative universe.
Right.
Yeah,
The
Obstruction.
fifth and final. All of us are wincing because it's
probably the one we all like the least, and it's very much this letter from Lars to Jorgen. It's a very personal.
I appreciate it. It wasn't my favorite. It's
So
pretty low this, but it's the sweet.
It's Lars's take, his remake of The Perfect Human.
Right. Right.
Which has
But
been Jorgen the whole time.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's really just a love letter to his mentor.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's lovely, but it should be cut in half.
Yeah, the obstruction was...
It was really long.
The obstruction was Lars had to be the narrator and just be handed the script.
No,
Jorgen-
Jorgen had to read
Lars
the script.
said,
Lars wrote it.
I'm doing this one.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to read a script I write. I'm going to put your credit on it. Like,
Yep.
you're the
I'm directing
director.
it, but you're going to be credited for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is the ultimate release of any control. While he can control, and they filmed, part of it was filmed of them actually doing some of the voice recordings, and he said, "Oh, you're phrasing that in a way to get around what is actually trying to be said. I see what you're doing there."
All right.
Which, if he's a smart guy, he would do that because he's like, I want to put my spin on it, and Lars doesn't.
Of course. He's an artist.
Right. But I think one of us had said too of like at this point it's just two buddies like effing around with each other. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
these
no,
two-
they-
Trying to one up each other.
Right.
and,
Yeah.
dig at each other a little.
Which is exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Wow.
But overall,
other thoughts.
If you're a film nerd, see this film.
Yeah, absolutely. This
It was
is a wonderful
really
masterclass.
enjoyable for anyone who likes films.
Yeah, if you have some knowledge of filmmaking and the process and what directors go through, what writers go through, how it's all sort of put together, because there is some behind the scenes footage. So the last one was a compilation of the documentary style filmmaking they did of the making of the other four. So it was just that compiled together, which included cuts of the animation as well as all the different kind of interactions that they had while they were looking at it and then challenging them. And I thought, again, yes, there was a lot of Von Trier in the last one, which is kind of like, what's the point? Not necessarily. And I'm going to put my words down. I'm going to speak the words.
Everyone.
It's not for everyone. It's
Not
a short film done 5 different ways, with each remake requiring more and more challenging boundaries upon which they are created and or filmed. This film is for film nerds, not for the casual viewer. Period.
Right.
I mean, if you are just a casual, like I'm a casual viewer, I'm the odd one out here. It was a little boring.
This is no space opera. This is no Marvel.
This is a documentary.
This isn't Fast and Furious.
This is a documentary, people. So basically, it's a documentary. I mean, it is. Yeah. It is a filmmaking, as Brian mentioned, kind of a masterclass. It's like, this is how you break down someone's approach to filmmaking in different ways, and how you then highlight and find where the holes are, and then plug them with other approaches.
Yeah. Although I would watch a Jorgen Leth directed Fast and the Furious.
Yeah. It would not be so fast and not be so furious. It would probably be really slow.
It'd be a smoldering kind of anger.
Yeah.
Like it told through some text as a man over several shots drinks a quart.
I was going to several shots are just in a cafe somewhere, and he's got this hot coffee that he stares at.
And then it zooms in on his eye.
The word family.
And then a fast car drives by.
The word family's interposed over the screen. Yeah.
I love this. I love all of this.
Yeah. So
we're going to make that film.
You can edit it, Brian. You know how. The rest of us are going to be like, hey, he has a new iPhone. We can do it in cinematic mode.
Dan pointed to me, listeners, because this is an audio medium. We can't see what we're doing.
I know.
Aaron, stop juggling those chainsaws and sit down.
But it's fun.
Yes, it is. Funny.
So, Dan, so we had 5 Obstructions, a movie. Yes. It's already definitely for film nerds, or for people that want to watch a movie on creativity and the creative process. But we tried. While we're watching this movie, that's the same film with 5 different expressions, we drank 5 beers that are very different expressions of the same basic beer.
Yes.
And so I was going to ask, like, IPAs, they have a lot of iterations. There's a lot of variety of IPAs out on the marketplace.
Yes.
It's often used the way that people say Kleenex for tissues. Or Band-Aid for adhesive strip. Like a lot of people will just say, "Oh, IPAs" to mean craft beer.
Yes, it's ubiquitous at this point because there's so many different styles, and you're just like, "Hey, just give me an IPA. I don't care which one, just give me one," because you expect it to be hoppy.
Yeah,
It should be, in theory, based on the rules and governing body. That's the BJCP program that has what is beer and how is it labeled, and then not how it's labeled, but how do you classify it? And it should be above 6% at a minimum. And it should contain enough hops that it's more hoppy than malty. Because pale ales, which is what it's based off of, were that way, where it's more malt than hop. You can have a hoppy pale ale that's like 5%, and you're like, oh, that's just like an IPA light. And that's exactly the point. It's an alcohol. It's an ABV is the differentiation. Now, there's specific like expectations to have for the coloration, the amount of alcohol that's in it at a minimum, the aromas and the types of hops you're using should at least include certain kinds. The malts themselves, now IPAs, again, there's dark ones, there's light ones, there's now cold lagered ones, so they're going to be a little bit lighter. They're going to have a completely different aroma and approach because while you're using all the same base ingredients, you're using a different yeast.
This sounds like a lot of Hopstructions.
It is. There's a lot to talk about, but we're not going to get lost in the weeds. I'm going to try not to get lost in the weeds. We're going to keep this short and simple.
With these 3 guys, you're surely going to get lost in the weeds.
Yes.
Right.
I'm going to take my teacher hat off for a moment and just read what Lagunitas IPA is, the first one we tried with the first iteration. So I picked out, we actually have more beers in the fridge than iterations. but I chose appropriately based on we went West Coast, Midwest, East Coast. Then we did a cold IPA, which is again the newer style, or IPL, India Pale Lager.
And then a red.
And then a red IPA, which at some point was called an India Red Ale, but they kind of are walking away from that a little bit.
Right.
Good.
And they're just calling it a red IPA, which is an official subclassification. I have made a red IPA before, so it's legit.
This first one, then, the Lagunitas we were watching with the Cuba expression of the movie.
This is a 6.2%, 51 IBU. This is when you look at the justification or the language used for what the American IPA is. This is actually listed as one of the primary examples of what an American IPA should be.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, so it's kind of a benchmark.
It is, very much so. This beer's been around for a long time.
It's the perfect IPA.
It is the perfect IPA.
Watch as it dances and eats lobster dinner.
And it's all just you pouring it on the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I was chatting with Brian before y'all got here about the types of hops that they use.
was.
So the C hops. So you have Cascade, Centennial, Chinook, and Citra. And there's a few other ones out there. And Simcoe tends to also be thrown in there, but it starts with an S and not a C, but it's a derivative of the others. The pine notes, the citrus notes, not floral. You shouldn't get much floral, but you're definitely going to get maybe some juicy activity. You know, it's going to taste like citrus. Citra hop being the main one that does that. The others, not so much. You're also going to get, like, typically an IPA is going to have, typically West Coast and traditional IPAs have a piney hit to them, and that's going to come from the Cascade and Centennial. The Chinook is going to give you some of that vegetal activity, but not as much. Based on the hop profile you use and the malt profile you use within certain parameters of, like, okay, I can get away with getting a certain dark color, but that's why they created all the sub-styles. Red IPAs, brewed IPAs, hazy IPAs, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on and on. Because people started experimenting and doing variations on them, and they're like, enough people do it, then there's enough examples of it, we can then make an official classification for it for judging purposes. It's really hard to take a red IPA and say, hey, is that the same as this standard American IPA? Well, it's going to taste somewhat similar. It should have the same malt characters and should have the same amount of hop presence. It may not be super bitter or less bitter, but it's a different color.
Right.
But it's still an IPA because it still fits within those boundaries. That was the whole thing with us trying these 5 different styles, because it's like, it's all IPA and they all do taste like IPA. If you've had IPA before, these are all classified and really good examples. All of them were pretty decent. We didn't have one of those New England juice bomby ones. The East Coast IPA was just a hazy and not a big juice bomb, which has been really popular over the last 2 years. I wanted to steer clear of that because those destroy your taste buds. And we really didn't want to do that.
Kind of blows out your palate.
Exactly. So any thoughts on this Lagunitas? As Brian had mentioned before the film, when I was bringing it out, it's like, hey, I've had that a few times. And I'm like, yeah, you know, it's been around a while, and California is where it's from. So, yeah.
I remember there was like a real strong hop profile, especially to start. I did get some of that like kind
Very
of pine.
piney.
Yep. But over time, that pine, maybe just as it warmed up, like the pine receded for me a little bit, and it got to be a little bit more like fruity.
Yes.
If I remember that one. I mean, 5 is a lot for me to try and hold my memory for.
Yeah, it's a lot of different beers that have distinct characteristics, but they all fall, again,
Within the world of IPAs.
it's all IPA. I mean, because it's got a certain amount of hop presence. The malt's a little different, but hey.
Yeah,
I feel like
I would say they all tasted a little bit different.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't describe nor hold 5
Yeah.
flavors. In my
I'm not
mind.
expecting anybody to,
Right.
but yeah, no, I have all the notes in front of me, so I'm cheating. But yeah, I think as a standard, as a baseline, I was like, let's get the most standard baseline.
Yeah.
Of like,
yeah, something to gauge the others off of.
Correct.
This is what I think of, like when I think IPA, like this type
Yeah.
of hop forward presence is what I imagine.
I think Blake, you said, oh wow, you know, because you smelled it and you're like, there's some pine there.
the
There's some
smell.
acidity.
The smell hits you real hard, and then the taste didn't seem as bad after the smell.
Correct.
I like
the
it.
taste,
Okay.
The taste did not follow the aromatics, which is, again, a style of making beer where you can have something be more aromatic forward and then the flavors are more gentle, or the other way around where it doesn't smell a lot or it smells completely different. Like last episode, we had a French grape beer that smelled like dirty socks but didn't
Right.
taste like it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was terrible until you tasted it, and then once you tasted it, it was really good.
What was the second beer we had? I
So,
genuinely can't recall.
the second one-
You were nice enough to pour them into glasses for us, so all I
Yes.
just saw was my
Yeah,
glass
again,
full.
people, we did taster size pours. We did about a 1.5 to 2 ounce pour of each. We're like, we need to get through all these, and I poured them into glasses because if you're gonna do tasters, don't do it out of the can. You want to be able to get at least some foam or some head in the glass. That way, the aromatics, because when the foam bubbles pop, that releases the aromatics.
This is the same reason that people get so worked up about the shape of a wine glass.
Correct.
How does the air flow over the surface? How does it aerate? How do those volatiles leap into the air as you're drinking it? And how do you experience that through your nose?
I personally prefer a rhombus-shaped wine glass, to be honest.
Yes, rhombus. I have an interesting
Or a trapezoid.
decanter upstairs, but we're not going to talk about that now.
But
Blake has seen it.
Second one.
very
So Blake, if you'll read us the
Bell's Two-Hearted IPA. So Bell's is out of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
That's it.
That's a 60 IBU, 7%. But do you want to read what else is on the can, or did I already read everything on the can?
I think you're right. I mean,
there's a trout on the.
There's a big
government warning, according to Surgeon General. That's not very interesting.
No. So this was named after the fishing waters in Michigan's
There-
Upper Peninsula.
Yeah, there's no fun little speech on
it's a Uper beer.
It's a Uper beer. The Two-Hearted is an American IPA brewed and dry hopped with 100% Centennial hops. So again, the big C. This is one of Bell's best-selling and widest distributed. We didn't get it on the West Coast up until about a year ago. It wasn't available here, and someone decided to bring it out.
I think this one might have been my favorite.
Yeah.
I feel like 'cause I made a
I
trip about
really
Michigan.
enjoyed this.
Yeah, yeah.
But it may have been following the super piney Lagunitas.
Yes.
right?
So this is going to be more citrus, grapefruit than pine. So the pine is
I
really
do like
settled on the
grapefruit,
back.
though.
Yeah.
There's a lot of grapefruit, a lot of citrus activities.
Right.
Centennial is going to give you those three big. The pine kind of is always a secondary. It's going to be more of an herbal or vegetal type, and not necessarily pine in and of itself. But that is, again, those big C's are really important when you're talking about IPAs or IPAs, as they're commonly referred to.
So the juiciness that we sort of experience, it's the acidity that reminds us of different fruit.
Correct.
And then I would say also too, like I meant to try and keep track of like what was the viscosity of like how heavy were each of these as I was drinking them, but they're pretty similar.
They were
Like,
all very, very similar. Even the hazy one, which we're going to talk about next, while it was hazy in color, it wasn't hazy on the mouth.
Right.
It looked hazy,
Threw me off.
but it didn't. It just was a very smooth, similar malt characteristic.
It looked thick, but it wasn't.
It did not have two C's.
Yeah.
What an obstruction.
Okay, so on to number 3. Any last thoughts on?
I really enjoyed this one, and maybe it's my palate being Midwestern also, but the fruit forwardness of this I thought was really, really nice. I thought everything was nicely balanced in like the different flavors. That the malt was like there, but it wasn't very forward. I guess it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't the same kind of resinous IPA hop bomb.
Yeah.
That I've been traumatized by in the past.
Correct. And
We've all been traumatized
We'll
by
talk
those,
about
Aaron.
that here in a little bit when we get to number 4. But for number 3, Brian, anything before we move on to the Sweetwater?
No, I enjoyed that one. It
Yeah.
felt much lighter than the first one.
Yes. So on to number 3, Sweetwater Brewing. This is HAZY with periods between each of the letters. The Pursuit of Haziness. We endowed this with a straight up juice bomb with a double dry hop of Mosaic Citra, Eldorado, and Azaka for a blast of mango, stone fruit, lime, and other pine aromas.
More like a juiced firecracker.
It was. It's not a mirage, but it's a tasting, refreshing oasis in your pursuit of
Is it weird that
haziness.
when Dan said Mirage, my brain immediately went to Sabotage by the Beastie Boys?
So these guys have been open since 97, been around a long
Whoa.
time. They're out of Atlanta. I applaud them for being around, and the can is just pretty straightforward. Just says hazy IPA on it with some nice kind of colors. It's a 45 IBU, 6.2%. Again, Mosaic and Citra, those are your standard IPA hops. The Eldorado and Azaka are what are going to give you that mango and stone fruit and lime. It's just going to be, it's meant to be a juice bomb, but it's not anything like the hazy New England style IPAs that we have suffered through in the last few years. This is just a hazy that has some juicy characteristics to it, but it's not overdone,
So I
which
feel-
I really like.
I feel like this would be a better choice for a warm summer day versus a regular hazy. Because I do like a hazy IPA, but they're it's a lot.
It's way too much.
It's usually my one beer if I'm going somewhere. Like, all right, this is the one beer I'm having tonight.
Correct. There is, I think, something to be said for something like this beer that originated the hazy craze. This probably existed before the New England styles have been around. This beer is one of their core beers that they distribute all the way to the West Coast.
Holy cow.
So I assume I'm making an ass out of you and me, but I'm going to guess that this style of beer that they're making has been around longer than the New England Juice Bomb. So it's like, let's make an interesting hazy beer, but hey, everybody else is just doubling and tripling up on the El Dorado and Azaka to kind of give it really that punch. That I'm going to hit you upside the head and in your mouth, and it's going to be super dry, and it's going to
taste.
It's going to be rank,
Like old
rank.
socks.
Juicy big juice bombs to me are ranky. They're not pleasant. I don't like to do them. You guys have any thoughts on this one?
Like rotting fruit.
Yes, in the sun.
But this beer did not taste like rotting fruit to me. It was juicy. It wasn't super juicy.
Yeah, I mean, I caught a little mango in there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't abhorrent.
So a predecessor to the big juice bombs.
Yeah.
It's the second beer tonight that had a fish on the can.
Correct.
It actually, to me, it seems it's almost like, an established outfit has seen some of these avant-garde beers and is saying like, okay, I'll take the good parts of this crazy cutting edge stuff that's being done. And, some concession's been made to the juiciness, but it's not going to be your like Andy Warhol, like on the cutting edge of juice.
Aaron, I see what you did there, and I raise you Lars von Beer.
I was tying it in.
It was nice. It was nicely done.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
What's the fourth beer? Because I think I like this one too.
Yeah, so this is the most hybrid of the styles, which was the animation that we watched, the remake, which is completely different.
The fourth obstruction and the fourth beer.
Mm-hmm. And there is an animated thing on the beer label too. It works on multiple levels.
It ties together.
It tied together very well. So this
definitely did that on purpose.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Check Your Cold IPA by Gigantic Brewing in collaboration with Upright. So Upright, which we had recently,
I like them.
Does some crazy open fermentation, dark lager open fermentation, funky stuff.
Right.
So they did a collab, and Gigantic makes big beers. They also do some really nice pilsners and lagers.
Yeah.
So for them to collaborate, it's kind of like best of the best. So the term cold IPA was not terribly new. The India Pale Lager, or IPL, has been around a long time. It's the same thing. You're taking a recipe that uses ale yeast, and instead you're using a lager yeast, and you're lagering it. You pitch it cold, you lager it for a month, and then you bottle it, or can it, or serve it in a keg, or whatever you're going to do.
But it has like the same overlay of hops.
Correct.
Like, on this base recipe.
So this cold IPA actually is meant to have some questionable hops in it. It uses Czech saws, not just the traditional. It does have Mount Hood and Crystal, which are West Coast, Northwest style IPA hops that you can use. They're not the big C's, but Czech saws is a really well-known, and fairly much everybody uses them if you're making a European style Pilsner. You're either using German Pilsner hops or you're using Czech saws hops. So this is also called a Czech lager. They really check your head IPA is what they're calling it. So it's kind of like they're saying, hey, it's kind of Czech oriented, but it's not. And it uses a West Coast IPA malt body. I can't read anywhere. I looked a bunch, and it just says that it's kind of Pilsner hops, but not Pilsner malts, because it does have a fuller body.
Yeah. There's definitely more to it than when you get just a Pilsner. I'll get a Pilsner if I want to have something with like dinner. But this feels like a pumped up Pilsner, like boosted.
I would say that it kind of lingered on the back of my tongue for a while after.
Really?
I got a bit more lemony hits on it, which is common in Pilsners, but I think that's just because of the Czech saws. That's the type of profile it gives you, the kind of herbal, almost grassy lemongrass. Lemongrass as a something you're going to put in a dish is going to give you some sharp flavor.
Yeah.
And this one had that, but it was also alongside all the regular traditional pine flavors that you would get with an IPA. So very confusing, hybrid style.
Right.
Thank you for making good beer, Gigantic, and you know, all the people that were involved in this. I applaud you for making something new and unique.
I enjoyed this beer, but I never, if I was blind tasting it, never would have guessed IPA.
Oh yeah, same.
It doesn't have the same hop profile. I mean, there is some hop there, but it's kind of this herbal, floral. To me, it seemed like a kind of a different animal than the other ones that we had. Which I
would agree with that. I mean, I couldn't describe why, but it was different.
It didn't have like the pungency.
It kind of stayed around a little bit more for me, at least.
It's fortunate it synced up with the movie that way because the animation was so different from the other 5 Obstructions.
Ah.
And this kind of stands out as being, you know, IPA, like almost IPA in quotes.
Like beautiful and distinct as kind of each
like a woman in a car smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, pretty much rolling the window down, speaking in French, and then rolling it up and driving away.
Mais oui, monsieur.
Yes. So there was a 5th Obstruction, and there was a 5th beer. The 5th beer we kind of rounded out with Dawn of the Red IPA from Ninkasi Brewing, which is out of Eugene. And again, we didn't really talk about where they... So Gigantic, the one previously, is out of Portland. Stillwater's out of Atlanta. Bell's is out of Michigan. And then Lagunitas is out of California. So we're kind of going across the country and coming back. Dawn of the Red, been around a long time. Used to be called an India Red Ale, but they changed it back to being a Red IPA because it fits that category more closely than a Red Ale. Red ales tend to be bigger in body and more wet cardboard or more caramel malt that's going to be sugary and sweet. This one, not as much of that, but it does have some of that. It's darker in color than a traditional IPA, 66 IBU, 7% ABV. It does have a lot of hoppiness to it. It is dry, really dry, I think. Mango, papaya, and pineapple are a little bit floaty there with those juicy hits, but overall, it does have some pine and citrus hit that just really speaks to the West Coast style, and it's just red in color.
I didn't get any of the citrus stuff. I might be biased. I don't like Ninkasi that much. I like most breweries. I've never had a beer from Ninkasi I was like over the moon about. I'll drink it and I'll think, okay, I know what they're doing. I don't want another one after this.
You do remember that we did an episode that we drank a beer that had gone to space and back from Ninkasi?
Is that who that was?
Yes.
Yeah, they're trying a little too hard.
So when you said that, it's like, oh yeah, we did an episode
I forgot that was
included
Ninkasi.
the beer that had been to space. The yeast went to space and came back, and then they made beer with it. It's like collector's edition.
I remember Tricera hops. I think is the what I think of when I think of Ninkasi. Tricera hops is one of the beers, and like it's well made, it's well done. It's very hoppy, as you might imagine from a beer.
It's for hop heads,
and it's not to my taste. I'll say, but it's a good example of a very hop heavy beer, and well made. I'm trying to think. There's others from Ninkasi I've had that I've enjoyed, but they do like their hops, it seems.
Yeah, they make a decent stout and a decent porter that I've had. Those are not as commonly found. To speak to where these were purchased, these were all purchased out of Fred Meyer here in Portland. So these are all nationally distributed. Most of them are all nationally distributed, or at least West Coast distributed for Ninkasi and for Gigantic. The Lagunitas, the Bells, and the Sweetwater, those are nationally distributed. So you should be able to find those pretty much all across the U.S. at a decent bottle shop or package store. If you have a grocery store that specializes in good beer or has a big aisle of it.
The Bells in particular has a note that don't to not litter if you happen to be in Puerto Rico. So it seems it's distributed there.
It's out there. 5 different beers, 5 different obstructions. I think all of these lended themselves a little bit. Again, we weren't drinking full beers. We only had about a 1.5 to 2 ounce pour of each, simply because there were so many. I think this was a good approach to the film. Doing different things.
Yes. Yeah.
That was the intent. I don't know if any of them matched up fairly well or not, because as Blake said, I was more watching what was going on the screen because we had subtitles on. The whole film, except for very few scenes, are not in English. So make sure you watch it with subtitles.
It's also engaging. I mean,
Yeah.
this you can't have on in the background.
No,
Right.
you
No,
have
no,
to
no,
pay
no.
attention.
You've got to watch this film.
We had to pause a few times for breaks, and it's just like, oh yeah, no, you can't just leave and
Hop back
you're gonna
out,
miss,
hop back in.
You're gonna miss something. So
Hop. Oh.
Nicely done.
hop in,
Nicely
hop
done.
out. All right. So any other thoughts on the film or these beers?
I will say I enjoyed all these beers, but I think kind of like the rest of us, I was so focused on the movie, I wasn't really judging which beer matched it the best. I was judging which beer did I like. I was trying to keep track of what I was tasting, but it was too much for
So
me.
which was your favorite then?
I really liked the Bells, the two Hearted IPA. It struck a nice balance of like there was some hop there, but it wasn't as forward. It's also, this is a brewery that I've never had anything by before, not to my knowledge. So.
Yeah. Again, they just started distributing to the West Coast about a year and during the pandemic. They started showing up, and we're like, where'd these come from? I mean, I'd had them in the Midwest and the East Coast, but never past Denver. That was kind of the cutoff point. And I'm glad they're out here because they do good stuff.
All right, Blake.
I think my favorite was the Gigantic. I think that was my favorite. I love this movie. I've been meaning to watch it for a while. I'm glad I got to watch it with friends who mostly, I'm not throwing any shade in, who mostly enjoyed it. And it makes me want to learn more about film. I was a film minor in college because I love cinema and movies and all that stuff. And
I didn't know that. I thought you were just oddly obsessed with movies.
I'm
he is.
oddly obsessed. That's why I minored, because I'm oddly obsessed.
It's like, I want to watch it anyway, so I might as well write about it and talk about it.
I can never do a name that tune, but I love a good round of framed trying to figure out a movie in 5 scene shots.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like it. I think Gigantic and Upright did a pretty good collaboration.
All right, Brian, thoughts?
I love this film. I'm going to search out the original, The Perfect Human,
Yeah.
to watch all the way through by myself. As far as beers go, the Bell's Two Hearts IPA,
Yep.
that was my favorite by far. Well, not by far. It edged out Gigantics a little bit. But all in all, I had a great night.
Cool. I will say that I'm really, really torn between 3 of them.
Oh.
It's hard for me to say one is better than the other when they all stand really well on their own.
Do you have a favorite, though?
I would say the Gigantic right now because it's different, and IPL is the hotness right now, and IPA lagers or, what they call a cold IPA. Everyone is experimenting with that right now.
IPA lagers are fetch. They're so fetch right now.
It is. It's like it does it justice without being, just a trend. It's like, wow, this beer, they should just keep making this beer because this is really good. It crosses 2 styles together that typically you wouldn't be able to, but hey, they're doing great things with weird yeast, and they're doing, lagering in a really well productive way that doesn't kind of take too much away from what the style should be. I think it's a nice blend. So
first we had Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Now check your cold IPA.
yeah, check your yeah. As always, thank you for hanging in there and listening. The opinions expressed during the taping of this recording are those of the hosts, and I want to say thanks to all the friends and family that give us feedback on this. And if you do have any feedback, give it to us because we're looking to expand and explore, and we're going to try to get to the theater here in the near future and actually do some movie and a beer out of it. We're going to record here, but we're going to go see a theater showing and try to actually get back to our roots where we used to actually see films.
We're going to live commentate in the theater and get banned from the theater.
Or just to get shit thrown at us as,
Yeah.
which may happen.
Lars von Trier will show up and say all our commentary has to be in a foreign language.
Go make Melancholia again, you weirdo.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
This is Aaron. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being the showing us how a perfect human listens to a podcast.
Nice.
Oh, there you go.
This is Blake saying, not in any clever way, because I can't think of a way to make it work with this movie, to hydrate or you're going to dihydrate.
And this is Brian. Thanks so much for listening, and please watch this film. Bye.
You know it. Thanks. Bye, everybody.